I would like to officially introduce you to the Dunbars families. We've been praying for the Dunbars because of the many challenges that they were facing on their journey to Purelight. But by God's grace, your prayers have been answered, and I now present you the Dunbars.
Praise the Lord.
So this is Sister Jocelyn, Jocelyn, and Brother Dennis Dunbar. So the Dunbar family, can you please tell us more about yourself? Sister Jess, I'll start with you.
Okay, I was born into an Adventist family, but my dad wasn't always that way. My mom was a Bible worker, and she went from door to door and working with the converts that came to the people that were coming to Elder Robenheimer's meetings. And one of the people that she met was my dad, and she shared a great controversy with him. And he read this book, and it changed his mind, and he became a baptized Seventh-day Adventist. Then my mom and my dad got married, and my brother and I were born to that marriage. And I am so grateful that I had a mom that was so in love with God, that was willing to give her life in service for Him, that was willing to read the Bible and to read those books that we have been given as a people, and to put them into practice in her life, and to share that love and that joy with me, that I have grown up loving this message with all my heart, loving God's word, wanting to study, wanting to follow every ray of light that God has given us, and to walk that light on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter what the devil throws in my path, but that I want to walk the way of God. And I hope that is the same with every single one of you. As God shines light on your pathway, walk in it. There is no more rewarding thing in your life that you can do, because you reach others through that living example, and you touch them where they are. And by the word of your testimony and by your life, they will be touched for forever. And then we can be in heaven together. Won't that be wonderful? And I think that's the ideal and the goal of all of us, to be in that glorious place that God has prepared for us who love Him. And to be here at this place, to learn, to walk closer to Him. What a privilege.
Thank you so much. Brother Dennis, can you just also briefly tell us about yourself?
All right, I was baptized as an infant in the Methodist Church. My parents became Adventists, I think, when I was about 3 years old or so. And also through evangelistic meetings, my uncle went to evangelistic meetings after going to different churches, wasn't satisfied. He attended, I think, Dr. Robenheimer's meetings as well up in Johannesburg, and he brought the message to my parents, and they became Adventists. And I'm grateful that I had a Christian upbringing. It wasn't as deeply into spirit of prophecy at that stage as what Jocelyn's family were, but I had a father who was practical, hands-on, and he taught me so much of what I know and channeled me in the direction of my career.
Thank you so much. So, Sister Jocelyn, I'm interested in finding out about your childhood experience, your high school, your college, and your studies. Can you tell us more about that?
I went to Patterson Park Primary School, that's our Adventist school in Johannesburg. And then when high school came, where was I going to go? Either Sedaven or Helderberg. And we chose Helderberg. They had a very strong music department, and our family was musical. And so we went to Helderberg, and going by train all the way down through to R, and that big choo-choo train, I don't know if you've been on it, it was wonderful. And then spending that time at Helderberg amongst those godly people and getting baptized there, which was a highlight in my life. And that also helped to set the foundation of following in the Lord's way all my life.
So you were at Helderberg, and then did you finish at Helderberg?
I didn't finish at Helderberg because my dad got ill, and I came back to Johannesburg and I finished at Damlin High so that I could be with my dad in his lost.
Right. So can you tell us about your life after Helderberg? What happened then?
After Helderberg and going to Damlin College, I would rather have been in an Adventist institution, and I didn't quite know what to do with my life. And because my mom had a nursery school, I went to the Teachers Training College in Johannesburg, and got my diploma there and loved it because they taught me such hands-on things of how to run a home, how to build a building correctly, architecture, and all sorts of things that have come in very handy. And then that also set my feet in the direction of wanting to further that education, and then my mom sent me to Andrews University after that.
All right. So if I can just come into your story, when did you get baptized, or when did you come to that realization of giving your life over to Christ?
Oh, I think it was there all my life, but when we were at Helderberg, and after coming out of meetings in that big auditorium, it was glorious, just being baptized with that group of young people who were so dedicated. And yes, after that, that afternoon, we went out on what they call a Sabbath, on a Sabbath afternoon, just to go and get into the community. Yeah, get into the community with Bible studies and literature. And then I was walking with a young man who I thought at that stage I was going to marry. He was going to become a doctor. Yeah, and this is the medical missionary start that came into my life.
All right.
Yeah, and...
So which year was this when you got baptized?
I was about 16. Yes.
All right, and what year was this?
You have to calculate.
I was born in 1950, so add 16 years to that, that would make 1970.
1950 plus 16 years old,
Yes.
That's when you got baptized.
Yes.
All right. Some of us need calculators to get that, but nevertheless. So you finished at Helderberg, you went to Andrews University. What prompted that decision for you to go to Andrews, and tell us the experiences you've shared at Andrews University?
Well, because I'd been in the education work and not knowing what to do with my life, and a friend of mine who had been at Andrews, a friend of a family, came to visit, and he was going back to Andrews, and we were talking about Walla Walla, Andrews, not knowing quite where to go, and then he said, look, I'm going back to Andrews, I will chaperone you there so that you don't have to go a little girl alone in the big wide world. I will take you with me. And so I went to Andrews with Fritz Newman, and he went his way, and I met the most wonderful people at Andrews. I was invited to classes in the seminary with Dr. Hans Laurendal, Dr. Daniel Augsburger, and Dr. Godfield Osterwald. We looked after his house while he went and did evangelism in Europe. And it just gave me such a love for the Lord and a desire to be in his work for the rest of my life and to do something for him. Yeah.
So what were you studying at Andrews University?
MA Education.
Okay.
Early childhood central.
All right. And how did you get to the point of coming back to South Africa?
I got sick. I really was not very well. And so Dr. Ruth Murdoch said to me, it's time for you to go home. And when I got home, my mom took one look at me and she said, you are going to Germany to the Cure House Elim, and they're going to get you fixed up. And so I went to the Cure House Elim.
Can you just tell us what is a Cure House Elim?
Elim is it's an Adventist institution that uses the natural remedies to bring healing to the body. And that's where I went. And they turned my body around that I was functioning very well again. And I was so grateful. And I determined that's what I want to teach the world.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come to you, Brother Dennis. Can you just tell us about your early childhood, your schooling experience, and yeah?
Oh, my early childhood, from probably about the age of 4 years old, my dad bought a small farm. And we lived there. That's when I started attending school at 5 years of age. And then something didn't work out there because my dad bought in partnership with my uncle, and he couldn't continue, and my dad couldn't continue on his own, so he bought another small holding south of Johannesburg, and that's where I grew up. And I was attending school from there. I went to Vereniging Technical High School to start my career. And then from there, I went to work, when I matriculated in 1968, I went to work at Johannesburg City Council to be trained as an electrical engineer.
Wow. I'm not sure, can you hear at the back? You're able to hear. I don't think they can hear you, Brother Dennis. I think you just have to speak a bit louder.
Okay, from where do I need to repeat?
I think everything is just...
Come on. And just now I contradict myself. As I was saying, from the age, can you hear me now? Yes. From the age of about 4 years old, 3-4 years old, my dad and my uncle bought a small farm near the Lion Park in Johannesburg. And my uncle couldn't continue on the farm, so he pulled out, and my dad couldn't manage the place alone, so he sold that, and we bought another small holding south of Johannesburg, between Johannesburg and Vereniging. And I lived there most of my life, and I attended school in Vereniging, the technical high school in Vereniging from there, before I started working for Johannesburg Electricity Department, where I was being trained as an engineer.
All right.
I think that's as far as I got up to.
All right. So please tell us more about your engineering career.
Okay, I was signed up as a trainee technician with Johannesburg Electricity, and it was a 6-month course and then 6 months work. 6 months course, 6 months work. And I got a technician's diploma, and then after the technician's diploma I got into the various sections of the municipality doing maintenance on various electrical plants. And then I went into distribution, where I did reticulation planning for townships, and then into substation maintenance. And I was trying to get promotion, and then I went in to do my government certificate of competency for engineers, which I completed when I was about 30 years of age. And then from there I got promoted to manager operations in Johannesburg, and senior engineer operations later. And I left Johannesburg Electricity Department. I resigned in '97 after 28 years with them, and then we went down to the Cape.
All right. So allow me to take you back a few years, and can you just tell us about your conversion and baptism experience? When was that, and how you started working with the Lord?
All right, when we were staying on the small holding in Apple Orchards, we had a colporteur lady come around and sell my folks some books. And I think I was in standard 9 at the time, and she told me there was a young lady that she wanted me to meet at the Southern Suburbs Church in Johannesburg. And I forgot about this, and I was already 3rd year at college when we went as a family to Southern Suburbs Church, and then she introduced her to me, and that was my first wife. And we got married and had 3 children. I've got 3 lovely daughters.
And when did you get to a point of being baptized?
I was baptized with her shortly after we started dating. On the colporteurs, she had a small holding as well, and they put up a pool there, and Pastor Ray Kent actually conducted our baptism. There were about 17 of us that were baptized that day. My brother and my first wife's sister, who were also sort of dating at the time, they also got baptized, and my brother and my sisters both got baptized, and some other folk from the area.
All right. So now you're baptized. How was your walk with the Lord after that? What were you active in doing?
Well, we became active in the Southern Suburbs Church, got involved with the youth and went through Master Guide training, and then became youth leaders in the church. Jonathan Lello was one of our pathfinders.
Wow.
And even the president of the union, I think he's still president now, Pastor Dave Spencer.
Okay.
He was one of our pathfinders.
Wow.
So, and then I became a youth leader, and the lay activities leader as well, and got appointed as a deacon in the Southern Suburbs Church. And then after that, we bought a small holding, and we built a house there that we designed and it was during that time that marriage came on the rocks.
All right. So now can you just, I want to come to you and Sister Jocelyn now. How did you guys meet? How did your paths cross? Please tell us about that. And I'd like to hear from both sides. Yes.
Okay, after my marriage came apart, I was looking for a partner that could be a mother to my children, because the children were going to be with me initially. My late wife, she's now passed away, but she changed her mind and then wanted custody of the children. So we let that go through, and then I was now looking for somebody who could be a good mother to my children. And I went to Orange Grove Church the one day, and I spoke to my sister, and she said to me, "Oh, you must check out Jocelyn Scrooby when you're there." Not knowing her, but Jocelyn had actually played for my sister's wedding.
Wow.
But I was still married at that stage, and I wasn't looking for anybody. And then it's strange, the coincidence how I met her, because the street to Orange Grove Church is a narrow street and it's a cul-de-sac. And the cars all parked behind each other, and after church everybody had to sort of extricate their car out of this massive cars. And Jocelyn came back into the church. I was still chatting to folk there, and she said, "Somebody parked me." And I said, "I must be the guilty one." So we went outside, but it wasn't my car that had parked in, it was somebody else's car. But we got chatting, and then she invited me to her home, and they had a problem with their borehole. I said, "I'll come and help you get the borehole sorted out." So I went there on Sunday, and we helped them get their borehole going. And then there were many other little projects that needed help at the school. And her mom had some flats across the road that she rented out for teachers, and I then went and stayed in one of those flats. Now, up until this point in time, I was still eating meat, because I'd grown up in a family that we had our own cattle and everything. And I always wanted to go onto a vegetarian diet. But my first wife wasn't too keen. She did cook some vegetarian food now and again, but she stuck to her meat. And then when I moved across the flat at Jocelyn's mom's place, I started having my meals with them. So one day I was still eating meat. That was 1987. And the next day, no more meat. Since then, haven't had meat.
Wow.
And my health improved. She said to me that within 2 weeks after stopping eating meat, my body odor changed.
Wow.
I had like little pimple things coming out in the back of my arms. That was gone. Since that time, I haven't had a family doctor, except for injuries.
Praise the Lord.
Wow. Wow. So, Sister Jocelyn, I'm interested of hearing the same story, but from your side.
Well, I really wanted to know who popped me in, so he was the guilty. He said he might be the guilty one. So, yeah. And then when he came to our home, and he saw needs all over that could be met, and he could help. And my brother is that way, my dad was that way, and my mom really liked him because he's a sweet guy. He's not Dennis the Menace, he's Dennis the Gentleman. And so she and my brother both said, if you get married to anybody, this is the guy that you must get married to. And so, well, eventually that happened. Yeah, and I'm very, very glad, because the very things that they saw in him, Purelight saw in him, and they said, this is filling our need. And that's one of the reasons that we are here, is because God has prepared him beforehand for the job that he is now going to be doing. And I'm very grateful to God for his leading all the way through.
Wow, wow. So now you are together now. Can you just tell us about your journey as a couple in ministry? I know that's a lot, but please tell us about that.
It's been, how many years now? About 35 years that we've been married. So it's a lot of history. From the time we got married, initially we were staying in town. Now I had the house on the plot still, but when we got married, we rented a house that a brother had bought back to back with a nursery school. And then I lost my housing subsidy working for the council because I wasn't occupying the house I was living in. So then we moved back out to the plot and finished the building because it was still in the process. We hadn't tiled the floors yet. My dad came up and did the ceilings for me. And then we finished the house on the plot. And we were at that stage still involved with the Orange Grove Church. But then we helped Pastor David,
David
van Wyk,
in Mayerton.
to get the Mayerton Church up and running. And then he went with us to the States. And then it was shortly after that that we sold up in Johannesburg area. I resigned from the municipality and we moved down to George. We bought a small farm outside of George, and then we started attending the Lurie Park Church in George. And Pastor Wally Bierma was our pastor at that stage. He's passed away since. I think he was the president of the Southwest or Namibia conference at one stage. He suggested that I go into colportering, and his wife was a colporter as well. So I got involved with colportering for about 4 years. And then when we had the first satellite downlinks in South Africa, Net 98.
Can you just explain what that is, because it was way before our time?
Is that so? Net 98 was the first satellite downlink from America with Pastor Dwight Nelson, and that happened in 98. That's what it's called, Net 98. I've got a t-shirt here that I'll wear one day that was made for that event.
Okay.
And one of the chaps that was involved, because I got involved with the technical team helping to set up the equipment and the recording equipment and everything, he was the high voltage superintendent at George Municipality. And we got chatting, and then he went and told them about my background and experience, and they asked me to come and bring my CVs. And then I went there, and they employed me firstly as a control officer, because they never had a control officer full time, to run the whole electrical network. And then from there, one of the guys in the planning section asked me to come and work in his section. And I was then working as the chief technician planning, doing reticulation, service connections for buildings and everything. And then from there, I applied for the position of deputy director distribution. So I had the whole distribution network under me. And the guy that got the job for me initially, I became his boss.
Wow.
And so the poor guy, he passed away about 2 years ago, cancer.
But it's while we were in the George Church that Walter became our pastor, Walter Fight, and Francie Duplessis. And they were our pastors while we were there, and what a privilege.
Yeah, earlier as you were speaking, you mentioned something of your encounter with Walter Fight. How did that happen?
Initially we met Walter Fight when I think it was shortly after he became an Adventist. We were still at Orange Grove Church. Dr.
Cecil Church.
No, Dr. Peter Landless was also a pastor there at the time, and Manny Harkham was a pastor there. And Peter Landless's wife's brother was Professor Cecil Churms. When they did the Creation Forum at Rand Afrikaans University, I think it was in 1988, that we had lunch together with Walter Fife, and then that's where we first met Walter Fife. And then we met up with him again when we came down to George. And then from the George Church, we were staying at that stage on a small holding close to, it was about a 32 hectare farm that we bought between George and Mossel Bay. And they wanted to have this campaign of Walter Fife's in Mossel Bay. So the Cape Conference denominated us as global mission pioneers to assist with the establishment of the church, which was eventually, it was conducted in Mossel Bay, but then the church, after the campaign, was established on the Hartenbos campgrounds that belonged to the Cape Conference. And then after that, when I started working full-time for George Municipality, it was about that time that I was invited to join George Municipality. Then, because I had to be on standby for power failures and everything in the city, we moved and bought a house in George.
All right. Before you continue the George story, as you're working this side, Sister Jocelyn, what are you doing in this time as he's working for Georgetown?
The George municipality.
George municipality.
Yeah.
What are you doing, Sister Jocelyn, as he's there?
Well, I was on the farm looking after a little boy that we had adopted, the most precious little boy, Joshua, and wanting to grow him up for the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And Den had been terribly, terribly ill, and they had spent a lot of time watching Walter Fyfe on videotapes. And this little boy could tell me more about what Dr. Walter Fyfe was saying than I could pick up between my trips to the sitting room and the kitchen looking after the guys. And it was just amazing. I knew that this child was going to become a second Walter Fyfe because he could just spout off all the things that he was learning from Walter. Praise the Lord for this man in our church. Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned something that your mom had a school.
Yes.
Please tell me about your career in that school, because I believe when you came from Andrews, you also went that side and started with
Yes, I looked after my mom's school. I ran my mom's school for 14 years.
Okay.
And it was the most wonderful experience because we were teaching those little children all the doctrines of the church. And to hear those little children recite the Bible. And you know those My Bible friends? We had one little girl, Shannara, who knew those stories off by heart. And one parent evening that we had together, because we love to have parent evenings, that's where you really can get into the mom's hearts. She would take that book, the one of Jesus and the Storm, and she would turn the pages and she would recite from memory the words on that page with that picture and turn it, and then she told the parents that whole story that evening. And I'm still praying for Shannara. It's just beautiful. And I think we should all do that. The people that we've had influence in their lives, keep praying for them, that they will keep close to the Lord and that we may all be together in heaven one day. Yes, so that was my life. And in our school, we sold pecan nuts and avocados that came from trees that my brother and I had planted as children. You take your avocado and put it in a bottle on the windowsill and it will shoot out, and you put it in the ground, and before you know it, it'll be producing avos. That's if there's enough time before the Lord comes. I know He's coming soon.
So,
yeah.
Your mom raised this school up because of the counsels that she had gotten from Spirit of Prophecy.
Absolutely, yes.
So this school was a school that was following the counsels and how, on the blueprint, if I should say.
Blueprint.
And you always had this desire to serve God through evangelism.
Yes.
And then the school was the best platform that you had to minister to these kids and then to the parents through the kids.
Absolutely. And to the parents directly when we had the parent evenings.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now you move to George. What happened in George?
Where did we get up to with the George story?
Well, that's where we worked closely with Walter Fyfe and Francie. He had such faith in us.
Again, it is before many people's time. Who is Francie?
Francie Duplessis. If you watch AD, you will know Francie Duplessis, who does
archaeology.
All right, tell us about that journey of how you worked closely with them. What were you all doing with them?
The evangelistic meetings?
Yeah, well, that was with Walter. We did the evangelistic meeting that eventually started the Dunbars church.
Okay.
Then, as I mentioned, we went back to the church in George, Lurie Park Church. But there were a lot of folk there from Malawi and Zimbabwe that couldn't understand Afrikaans, and the services were divided. One Sabbath English, one Sabbath Afrikaans for the divine service. And we started off by showing videos for the folk who couldn't understand Afrikaans in a separate room while they were having divine service. But that didn't go very well with the people preaching, because a lot of the members wanted to rather come and watch the videos than listen to the sermon. So eventually Pastor Walter Fyfe was involved then, and he said, why don't we then translate the services? And myself and another chap in the church used to take turns and translate while the preacher was speaking Afrikaans. We'd sit in a room with the headphones and translate to English, and the folk who couldn't understand the Afrikaans would have headphones in their pews, and they would hear the sermon in English, but it was very taxing because I couldn't see what was going on the screen. If he was using slides, I could only hear his voice.
Yeah.
So it was rather stressful. By the time I finished the divine service, I was sweating.
Wow.
Not good to sweat on the Sabbath. And then we decided that we must start an English church. And it was about this time that we sold our house in George, and the market was so that we couldn't afford to buy something similar. We wanted to get out of town because of the influence of the city life on our son Joshua. Started getting involved with the wrong kind of friends. And then we rented this property out at Vic Bay. He was also surfing at the time, so it was close to the beach. And we bought him a small little motorcycle so he could get down to the beach. We didn't have to run him up and down to the beach all the time. And we then, when we got this place, it was derelict. We had to renovate it. It should have been condemned. It was in such a bad state. We started fixing this place up to live in. And then we had the meeting to try and establish an English church. And we said, well, look, here's a venue. We're busy fixing this up now to live in, but we might as well fix this up and use it for the church. And the members of the committee all agreed, and that was decided, and that's when we started the Vic Bay Church. We could seat up to 100 people in that church. It had a hall. It's a part of the house. It was under roof. We had to get the roof and everything patched up a little. And it was probably about double the size of this venue. Under roof. And we had a fireplace there, and in winter the folk could come in and we had a lovely warm fire going. It was such a nice social event. And we had, every Sabbath we had potluck lunch like today.
Yes.
After church. We almost never had less than about 25 people for lunch. It was a lovely experience. We were duplicating DVDs and things as well. Jocelyn was very much involved with that.
Are these DVDs of Walter Fight that you've been duplicating?
Various ones, and some of the stuff that we got on the internet. Ivor Myers and those guys.
Wow. Yes.
And then I also did health presentations and demonstrations, and it was just to see the interest and to see the possibilities that you can do with God's beautiful food, and that give the maximum health benefits to us, and it was really a pleasure to do that.
Wow. So at this time, were you still full-time employed?
I was still full-time employed at George Municipality. In fact, I was on standby, and sometimes on Sabbath I would get called out of a meeting with a power failure in town, and I had to go and man the control centre. But the only way I could reconcile that to my beliefs is any money that I got paid for overtime for working, on Sabbath to restore power, that I didn't touch that money. That is the Lord's money. End of story. I kept accurate record of that. The other thing is, of course, electricity, people are dependent on it. We had people on life support systems, so it's an essential service. Somebody has to do it, and we had turns, various senior staff, to do standby duty. But we refused to do any planned work on Sabbaths. It was only breakdown we would attend to. One time our director was a bit disappointed because I said to him, sorry. He was a Baptist man. But I said, this is it, planned work, that can be arranged beforehand and somebody else can handle that. Breakdown's a different story.
Sister Jess.
Well, at that time when we were at Vic Bay, one of our preachers was Walter Fight, and what he said, I wish that all churches could break out a wall like this. By that, we hadn't filled that wall in because it was still summertime. It was getting to be winter when it was going to be cold. He says the view from here is beautiful.
Over the Otaniqua Mountains.
Oh, with these huge pine trees and this grassy lawn in front and the beautiful flowers. And just to see his enthusiasm and his love for God's nature and this beautiful picture that was right there, part of the divine service, drawing us to the creator of all this beauty. I will never forget that. When we eventually put doors up there, you got to do something on them that is going to stop people from walking through the door.
Glass doors, sliding
so
doors.
I cut out a 3 angels message, and I put on something that looked like sandblasting, but it was a kind of a glue, and we did this on all the doors. It was just so inspiring.
It was also phosphorescent, so in the dark,
Yes.
after the lights were on, you could see the three angels glowing.
Wow.
We, in fact, our emblem, we'll show you photographs and stuff, I've got them on the computer at one stage, of our emblem that we had there, three angels above the pulpit and everything.
Yeah.
Wow. So this was all your experience while you were still in George.
Yes. Yes.
So what happened after George?
Well, that was the time that I went on pension. My mother passed away November 2016, and we'd already made the decision that we were going to go to move in with my daughter up in KZN,
Okay.
near Oraby Gorge, or near Port Shepstone. The Uzumkulu River that comes down at Port Shepstone. The farm we had there was on the border, on that river, for about 4 kilometers of river frontage. It was lovely. And there we grew all the fruit and vegetables and things that we needed almost out of the garden. But the reason we left George as well is I was going on pension, and I couldn't afford to keep the rental up on the place for the Vic Bay Church. It was costing me in the vicinity about 15,000 Rand a month to maintain that place. So I said, you know, this is it. This is the end of the road here as far as we are concerned. And they had to find an alternative venue for the church. And then we moved up to KZN on the farm.
Tell us about the experiences that you had in KZN.
On the farm, we couldn't really reach out much to people there. But when we went into town, we'd meet people. And Jess can tell you a bit more of that. And then we'd share literature with them, talk to them, and they became good friends. And in fact, we're still in contact with some of them.
And every time you go to town, you found something else to give to them, and you keep feeding them with information. And it's just the most wonderful thing to see either they're growing spiritually or they're starting to resist. And to know that you're reaching souls that might be in the kingdom for you, with you forever, is the most important thing.